let me introduce at this point former Deputy Finance Minister Fiscal, who's joining the conversation now. He is obviously concerned about Ghana's return to the IMF and has some perspectives to share on this matter. Also joining us as well is Professor Lord Mensah. He'll be joining us later to also comment on this matter. But Fifi, let me welcome you to the program. First of all, I'm sure that when you heard about the announcement, there were a number of issues running through your mind when you officially saw that announcement from the Information Ministry. What's your take largely on the decision by government to turn to the IMF?
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to you and all your many viewers across the world. Let me begin by saying that this whole journey back to the IMF on the part of our friends in government ordinarily will not be too much of news, but for the fact that they spent virtually a good part of many years making all kinds of proclamations. And some way, somehow, those proclamations have come back to haunt them today. The truth of the matter is that talk is cheap, like they say. The reality, however, is a whole different ball game. Normally, going to IMF shouldn't really be such. It's not an iniquity going to the IMF because really there are moments where you clearly are in need of some, shall I call it, big brother to give an assurance to investors and people who want to do business with you, and you need that. I mean, sometimes, especially if you're a developing country. The problem we have is that we have a group that absolutely made it look like the only reason for which anybody else to go to IMF is through incompetence and through mismanagement. And so it's been so difficult for them today to accept that their own difficulties have led to this IMF today.
And in fact, Fifi, so, you're not getting that concession anytime soon. In fact, government is still standing by its guns, saying that the reason for which they're heading to the IMF, the context is far different from what the case was for the NDC when you turned to the IMF.
Unfortunately, that is a tragedy. That is a big tragedy that we are dealing with here. If I want to submit that the real crisis of this country today is not so much an economic crisis, it's much more of a credibility crisis, a crisis of character, a situation where we simply do not have in place men and women in leadership who have got the honor and the honesty and the humility to accept the truth. I mean, how could your situation today be different? When all over the sub-region around us, countries facing the same situation that you are facing, and none of them have had to rise to the IMF. How could your situation be different when it is that even before COVID, your deficit financing was already in excess of 7%? It was 7.5% in 2018, and in 2019, it was 7%. How could it be different when in 2019, you're already using about 91% of your tax revenue to take care of your what you call debt servicing? So how could it be? It tells you that this problem has been long in coming. This is not a problem that just started yesterday. So for them to continue persisting, you see, unfortunately, the problem we have is that some way, somehow, this group in power believes that ordinary people are not smart. They are not intelligent. And therefore, all you need to do is to continue lying to them, finding different things to blame. If you are not blaming,
is that really the case? You're not disputing, for instance, COVID-19, a global pandemic, its effect on the economy is undisputable. You also have the situation about the Russian-Ukraine war. Economists have agreed that indeed there's the impact on a number of developing nations. So where's the lie here, really?
It is going to be the case all the time. Like there are definitely going to be issues that will come from outside to affect you. But the actual strength of an economy is seen when it is that you are able to weather through those storms. How is Ivory Coast weathering the storm? How is Rwanda weathering the storm? How is Nigeria weathering the same storm? What about Togo, an economy that is far, far, far less than ours? What about Benin? So it tells you that you have no excuse. In fact, like Baumia actually said, how is it that external, what you call phenomena, would leave every single country in this sub-region and all over sub-Saharan Africa and attack only Ghana. So you need to have the honor and the humility to accept the truth and stop lying. Because the more you lie, the more you are sinking even more. That's why I'm telling you that the real problem of the country is not so much an economic crisis. It's a crisis of credibility, a crisis of character. We have simply not got a group of people who are humble enough and honest enough to accept the truth. And the more you continue to lie, the more your problem will compound. So that is the first thing that must happen. They must stop giving all these lies. They should stop deceiving the people and accept the fact that they simply have reached a crisis situation and they need help. Of course, they have accepted that. But what it is they are failing to do is to deceive the people, to continue lying to the people that the problem is not our making. How will it not be your problem? If you, as a result of your own fiscal recklessness, you cause a deficit financing, it was a fiscal deficit of almost 16% in the year 2020. How could that not be a problem? Why did Togo and Benin, Rwanda, Burkina Faso don't have the same deficit in the year 2020?
Okay,
are you the only person that faced COVID? Obviously not.
With the way you're talking about the problem, it appears that you're one-sided, isn't it? How about the aspect of the minority itself? You've heard from the information minister last night, for instance, point to the fact that government's internally generated revenue mechanisms were frustrated, quote unquote, by the minority side of the House, i.e. your former colleagues, including the likes of Haruna Idrisu, who was leading that charge, vehemently saying that, for instance, the electronic transactions levy, which government was eyeing to show up revenue, was not that magic one.
Hello, can you hear me, please?
Yes, I'm with you.
Yeah. I mean, the talk about minority, that itself is actually a way of telling the people of Ghana that they don't know what they want. And because, I mean, you in the media are not part of the minority. The civil society, they are not part of the minority. The ordinary Ghanaians that voice out loud and clear that they were simply not ready for e-levy, they are not part of the minority. So for you to continue claiming that it is because of the minority, that's why the e-levy has not succeeded, it's simply insulting the people of Ghana. That's why I'm telling you that they need to have the humility and the honor to accept it where the truth is and stop trying to find scapegoat. That's what they are doing. It's basically trying to find scapegoat.
Yeah, but you agree that, for instance, if we had maybe 4 months of uninterrupted e-levy, that would have obviously pushed government to meeting its targets in terms of the revenue. I'm
so sorry. It looks like there's a bit of challenge.
Yes, I was just talking about the frustration.
I don't know whether you can hear me.
We had laxity about 4 months, which we could have made use of if the e-levy were to be passed, for instance. And I'm just dwelling on the e-levy because it's one of government's revenues which it banked its hopes on. The argument is if we had gone throughout that 4-month period without any frustration from the minority, that would have been settled.
As I'm saying, it's not the minority alone that spoke. The minority simply was reflecting the views of the people of Ghana. And the people of Ghana, by a vast majority, say, listen, you have already overtaxed us. You clearly will recall in 2021 the raft of taxes that they brought. After they had deceived the country, claiming that they were going to make everything free, which was simply nothing but political gimmick in order to be able to win power, taking advantage of COVID, they came back and imposed a raft of taxation on the people of Ghana in 2021. So in 2022, the people listen. Even the little money we have in our Momo, that we will not let you have. And they said they will. So that is an indictment on them. The fact that they simply were not, they were not far seen enough to know that this was definitely not going to happen because the people of Ghana simply did not want it. That should tell you again that you simply are not capable of handling an economy. So the problem we are having is a self-inflicted problem. They brought it upon themselves and they have nobody to blame. So they attempt to try to blame the minority, blame John Mahama, blame COVID, blame Ukraine. Absolutely is neither here nor there. The problem is 100% they are making.
Fifi would be exploring the solutions shortly. I want you to just hold on for me briefly because we understand that the negotiation team from the IMF will be in the country in the next 48 hours. My colleague Isaac Kofi has been monitoring that for us. He's bringing us up to speed with what to expect and what our positioning is. Isaac, if you can hear me, first of all, tell us about what we are to expect. And also, we understand that, for instance, the finance minister failed to show up for one of the events at the Jubilee House today just because of that meeting with the central bank. So what are we to expect when this team actually arrives?
All right, so Wednesday's meeting is what I refer to as the shopping period. So there's a time for Ghana to shop for one of IMF's 9 programs that are available to the country. And for the past, 6 years, we've actually gone in for the extended credit facility, which is our last 6 programs that we had with IMF. And then, just like I said, the IMF is like a supermarket that central banks go there to, shop when they are in crisis or are in need. But listening to the government, considering the fact that they are going heavy on balance of payments, then it means government is really going in for the extended credit facility. But as it stands now, it's so unclear that which program governments will qualify for out of the 9 programs that I mentioned earlier.
Are we getting a sense of our current economic position and what it is that government is on the lookout for from the IMF, from what you've been hearing from sources?
So it's always good to compare what our situation was back then in 2015 to what we have currently 2020. So we start with what we call the exchange rates. So in 2015, by May, the CD had actually lost about 19.9% against the dollar. If you look at what we have currently in 2022, the CD has lost about 15.8% to the dollar. So the situation in 2015 is not really, significantly different from what we are seeing panning out in 2020. There's also inflation. Back then in 2015, when Ghana decided to go to the IMF, inflation was somewhere around 16.9%, and currently we are doing 27.6%, which is significantly different from what our situation was back then in 2015. Then the most important indicator, which we call the gross international reserve, by April 2015, it was somewhere around 4.8 billion Ghana cedis, and that could record as about 3.3 months of import cover.
Right.
And this time around, we are doing somewhere around 8.3 billion cedis, but it's still not different from the amount of import cover. It's still around 3.7, months of import cover.
Right. So I guess that will come up strongly when the negotiations begin. But just as we are learning, of course, the international market is beginning to react favorably as Joy Business is reporting to this austerity plan that was announced by government. Tell us more about it.
Well, at the moment, I think speculation is really working in favor of Ghana. For the fund markets hearing that, Ghana is going in for an IMF program, it means they are anticipating that we are going to get liquidity in the form of foreign currency to actually, help us in our debt servicing in 2022. So it's good news, but it's still early days. We are still waiting for, the next, credit ratings from, S&P, from Moody's and other people. But just like I was saying, IMF themselves have been in Ghana. They were in Ghana last year, July, to do. We don't know if that one was also an Article 4 engagement, but they've assessed our economy, and then they have, a pretty good idea of how the economy is looking at the moment. So it will help them in deciding which program that Ghana will qualify for this time around. But it will all depend on Ghana. We are supposed to own the program. It's supposed to be our program. And all we have to do is to go to the table looking out for support from the IMF.
So many doubts and research on ownership of the IMF programs, but it's another conversation we'll have another time. Isaac Ofieje with our research desk there. Fifi, let me bring you back as we wrap up on our conversation with you, the solution now. But I'm interested, first of all, in finding out from you, did you believe that the IMF program, for instance, that you run as the NDC, yielded some positive results?
Let me just try to demystify this, okay? The IMF is not making you do it's not rocket science, okay? The IMF is not asking you to do anything that is simply what you got ahead of. The IMF is simply asking you, if you're earning 100 cedis, make sure your expenditure is around the same 100.
Yeah, but
if you have to go a
did
little
the IMF
that's
of the
okay.
NDC,
But don't simply go
did the
down.
NDC IMF work? I guess that's the question.
No, IMF clearly helps you temporarily by ensuring that investors who have lost confidence in you have some confidence back.
Yeah, but yours worked. Your program worked. You agree?
Before we went, I want to give an example. Before we went to the IMF in 2014-15, we were having a lot of challenges with the currency because investors were having all kinds of worry. If you notice, in 2016, for example, without even having one cedi from Bank of Ghana, we got zero financing from Bank of Ghana. The first time in our history. We got not one cedi from Bank of Ghana, but we still ended that year with the cedi depreciating by just 9.6%. In 2019, under the NPP, the cedi depreciated by 13%. That was before COVID. So it tells you that even their performance before COVID, in terms of the depreciation and currency, was far worse than 2016.
But did the NDC IMF program work?
But that's exactly what I'm telling you. If it had not worked, you would not have seen the relative stability of the currency.
Precisely what I'm looking for. Precisely what I'm looking for, because I'm looking for the solution. So would the NPP IMF, quote unquote, using that loosely, will it work?
It depends upon how. First and foremost, they need to stop the excuses. Because as soon as you continue giving excuses, it will not work. The excuses must stop because IMF is going to expect you to start telling the truth and stop running away from the truth. Two, IMF is going to expect you to ensure that the measures that are agreed upon are implemented, even those, and being humble and honest with the people, it will work.
So it's more about honesty for you. Hello, Fifi. Okay. It appears that we're having some challenges there. Professor Lord Mensah is also with us. We'll talk about organized labor shortly. But Prof, if you're with us, you've heard Fifi Kwete make the points there that it's more about honesty and sticking to whatever it is that the letter of intent is communicating to the IMF. Do you feel that this government will be able to stick by the intent that will raise with the IMF?
A disclosure. I mean, if the government is able to disclose into details the true stand of the economy, obviously whatever they are looking for on the table, they should be able to, get it. But then I'm afraid that maybe government might be resistant because if we should take a cue from when the Ghana was downgraded, the defensive posture of the government, tells you that maybe they may have some part of the economy or understanding the economy in a different perspective that those international organizations may not. But then I hope that going on the table, that should be, something that they can disclose. Full disclosure will be the order of the day. Right. Now, I heard you asking whether their program worked or not. I can say for a fact that it worked. Because if you look at the happenings over the years, the first few years that we're recording, positive growth, that's about 7% thereabout, with the interest rate, government borrowing rate coming down to about 14%, 13%. We were still with the IMF. That was about around 2019 thereabout. It was after the finance minister asked for a review of the Fiscal Responsibility Act. When we're exiting the IMF, the president, in his own wisdom, brought in an act which was approved by Parliament. And that act was the Fiscal Responsibility Act, which is supposed to keep us in check as to how we're going to spend and possibly how we're going to generate revenue. But then after the review in 2020, that is when we had the COVID, the finance minister asked permission that the state should give him the chance to go and ask from Parliament to review that Fiscal Responsibility Act that is holding our expenditure checks, to the extent of having what we call the Fiscal Responsibility Committee, made up of astute professors and people who can keep the government in check. But, we threw away all this. And even after we request that we go all out to spend, we never went back to restore it. And we should understand that the government posture over the years has brought us to where we find ourselves now. Because during the COVID, we should have accepted that things are not normal. And so, therefore, whatever expenditure lines we intend to have within that year, we should have reduced it to absorb the shocks that COVID came in with.
So you
remember,
basically agree.
Within the same year, we're having election. And before COVID and all those, we're complaining about electioneering year, excess spending. So there are three things that put us off board, and it made our expenditure so huge that to recover becomes a problem.
So you agree? So you agree, for instance, with Fifi Kwete when he says that it's a matter of credibility and that government is not being honest enough.
Hello.
You agree with that notion, as we've just heard from Fifi Kwete, that government was not honest enough. You agree?
Yeah, that is true. I mean, if you look at how the IMF and then the e-levy was packaged, it looks like more or less Ghanaians are being deceived, because if you give Ghanaians options that look politically, if we should go to if we take the e-levy, we may not go to IMF, but then if you don't take the e-levy, we are going to IMF. These are two options. Then it turns out that you are giving us a third choice, which is above all, telling us that we've gone to the e-levy and then we find ourselves in the IMF already. But look, let me tell you that even when you look at the numbers in the 2022 budget, clearly you will see that yes, indeed, the intention to go to IMF was clear. And I can explain to you in details those numbers. If you take, the budget that was read, we had 37 billion budget deficit. With this 37 billion, for the first time, government oriented the financing of the deficit in the domestic market, i.e., we financing more percentage in the domestic market than the foreign market. That is about 27 billion out of the 37 billion. It's only 10 that we are looking at financing from outside.
Right.
Now, with the 27 billion that we are looking at from the local market, we are assuming that the 7 billion that we're targeting for e-levy will come and offset part of the 27 billion.
Right.
It will be left with about 20 billion. Now,
right. So for you, the signs were already there.
Where we have liquidity issues and interest rates are going up. So obviously, that will be, from the soft spot, like the IMF. And so I'm not surprised that we are going to IMF anyway.
Anyway, we're grateful, Professor Lord Mensah, but there's a lot more, in fact, happening.